Hey Harmonizers, welcome to this episode with Tom's Treasure where we are going to do her first jumping. We're going to work on her canter, a bunch of her ABCs, and basically just do a bunch of under saddle training. So to start with, I'm getting on her on the right side this time. I do love to work my horses on both sides, so I'm a big promoter of getting on and off from both the left and the right sides, which sometimes people think is a little bit weird, but when you think about it, we want to work the horses back on both sides. We don't want them developing a phobia on one side, or sometimes people can even stretch their stirrups if you only get on from one side. So I want to make sure we work on that. And then we've been starting to work a lot on getting her to stretch and collect and not have such a rushy kind of trot stride. So we've been working on that a little bit, and you can see she's doing really well at taking some contact. I'm really happy with just how smart and willing she is. Here she's really stretching down pretty nicely and able to hold it and starting to get consistent. And this has just been a couple sessions, so I'm really impressed with how smart she is and just how willing she is. She's pretty cookie motivated, so that definitely helps. And then you can see we're practicing doing those halts without bracing, because she was really kind of bringing her head up and really hollowing her back through those transitions. So I really want to see her start to flex a little bit better, use her body a little bit better, and start to bring herself using her hind end a little bit more through those transitions. So here going a little bit to the left, and this is definitely her harder side. She tends to lean a little bit with her shoulder going to the left, but she's definitely doing a lot better. Here the pivot is having a hard time tracking and keeping up with her, but it will get caught up in a second there. But she was doing really well with holding that consistent frame and doing a lot better about that whole shoulder leading piece. So I do a fair bit of asking her to try to move off of that leg and kind of lifting up that shoulder a little bit. And overall, she's doing really well with that. There's Sarah in the background riding Elon, working on a little bit of kind of maintenance and muscle strengthening work with him. So there you can get a nice good look at her there, doing really, really nice. I don't know why the pivot had such a hard time going to the left and not so much to the right. Normally it does a pretty good job at keeping me in the center, but here it's cutting off her head for whatever reason. So we'll just forgive it this time. But all in all, doing really, really well. Doing a little back up, which she's doing really well at being nice and soft through there. Backing up and getting them to kind of round themselves and use themselves better is one of my favorite ways to start getting them to understand how to be soft to that contact and not bracing. I find that works for a lot of horses to start there. Obviously getting those cookies in between, that's a real big motivator and helps them to want to learn. And then I start to kind of get into some of the movements, moving off of my leg and understanding the different rein cues and just getting her to understand those pieces. So here's a little look at moving her hips a little bit. And then I realize I'm a little too close to the fence. I bring her forward. And then we'll go into that. Again, here moving her hip a little bit. So she's understanding that pretty nicely, stepping under with that hip. And as we progress this, I'll start to get a little bit more in time with her feet. Here's a little bit of sideways, and then moving the shoulders. So working off of the right rein cues to start with. So she actually is doing that really, really nicely, considering she's hardly been started under saddle. So that's looking really awesome. Another little cookie, of course. And then we'll take a look at the left rein cues. Having a little rub of her nose, which sometimes can be them releasing some stress or tension. So rubbing her face like that. And I tend to notice that she does that a fair bit, more so than other horses. So she's either really good at releasing tension, or she's kind of made that a bit of a habit as part of her break. But in an event, I always allow them to kind of do that. And then here a little look at moving her hip, which is a little bit stickier this way. So this is a left rein cue, and this is her side that's not as good. That's okay, it's not awful, but just took a little bit more to get that. And then here sideways, and then we'll take it into moving her shoulders afterwards. So just kind of playing around with all of those different cues. And again, she does really well with that. And I don't drill my horses on these exercises. I just kind of do a little bit, wait for it to be soft and right. And then when I'm happy with it, we move on and we go on to the next thing. I don't like to do things over and over again, expecting perfection and potentially going through a fight. We just kind of get on with it and off we go. So we did those movements, and then here's a look into the canter. So this was pretty awesome because canter is really new for her. And then right away she was like, okay, canter, this is her good way. So it didn't need any ground support or anything like that. And off she goes into that canter. It's a lovely little lope going around. And I'm not asking for contact or anything like that. We're just allowing that. And then when I asked her for the halt, you can see she really went into that halt pretty darn fast. She was pretty happy to stop for that cookie. So I'm like, okay, you've got some potential there to do some sliding stops in the future if you're already offering this on like our third time cantering or whatever it is at this point. So I was really excited about that, how easy that was. Little change of direction here. I think she's going to be a pretty handy little horse. Really, really awesome for the versatility stuff. She could probably be pretty cool at that, just with how fast she's learning all this stuff. Again, the pivot kind of struggles with me going to the left. Not sure why, but we're going to go for a canter to the left. And this is her side that isn't her as good side. And she goes into it beautifully. And I don't need anybody to cue me from the ground. So she's finally kind of got that canter figured out, which is great. And so here we are off on that canter left lead, looking really, really nicely. Not too fast or anything like that. She actually has a really smooth canter. Her and Elon probably have pretty similar canters, really, really nice to sit to. And then down into that halt and back up, nice and soft. So you can see she's doing really awesome with that. And the nice thing is as we get all this canter going really nicely, everything else just gets so much easier too. And just gets her feeling like she feels really, really kind of well started now. Like she's understanding a lot. She's kind of committed to learning and figuring out what it is we're doing. And it just feels nice because I'm like, hey, could you try this? And she's like, okay, I'll try. So here's a little look at, we're going to do some jumps now. And her first ever jumps, which are going to be pretty exciting. She does jumps from the ground, but this is kind of working on jumps in the saddle. And we'll come around and we're going to do some jumps. And here's just a first attempt at the flying lead change first, or the lack there of flying lead change. There's zero attempt on her end to do a flying lead change. She just can't counter canters, which is a good skill to be able to counter canter. So I do end up correcting her and helping her get the right lead. But I don't make a big deal about it because a counter canter is a skill that I'm going to want her to have in the future. And then I ask her to make a left change. And she's like, yeah, no idea. So I had to kind of break her down and do the left. And this is just me kind of playing around, very similar to what I did with King. I just wanted to see, okay, if I gave this to you, what would you do? And when I went over the pole, she swapped her lead. So I gave her a cookie there for swapping her lead. Not expecting her to do flying changes, but just kind of seeing if she had any natural instinct in there to swap. But not today, so no big deal. So on to our jumps that I promised you guys that I was going to go over there. So here's her little look at some jumps. There were some really, like you can see, there's super baby little jumps and some poles in there that we're doing. And we're just looking at some willingness to go. She's done quite a fair bit of this from the ground. So this is now just doing it in the saddle. And the most important thing as to ride this in the saddle is to make sure that I don't pull on her face whatsoever, because she doesn't know how to jump. And so the jumps are going to be a little bit awkward, and that's okay. The main thing is that I have to stay out of her way, because if I pull on her when she jumps, then she's going to lose confidence, and it's going to make it hard for her to complete the jump. She probably would have to drop her hind end down if I pulled on her face, and it will make jumping a bad experience for her. So I want to make sure that I don't touch her face at all as we're going over the jump. And then to kind of give a purpose to our breaks, I don't want to exhaust her. I don't want to just jump and jump and jump for a few minutes. She doesn't have the stamina for that. So we practiced standing beside jumps. And one of the skills that the horses need to learn for any type of obstacle work is they need to be able to side pass two obstacles or side pass two things and be willing to stand close to them. So you can see she gets reasonably close there, and I wanted to just bring her hip around just a little bit closer, and she kind of says, like, no, you're silly. Like, there's a jump there. I couldn't possibly get closer to it. And this is just a skill that she has to learn and figure out that she really can go closer. And so we work on it a little bit, and then you can see here, I'm going to ask her to go sideways over to it, and we end up being able to get nice and close to it to the point that I can reach over and I can touch the standard. Because for obstacle work, you do have to be able to pick things up off of barrels, off of whatever. You have to be able to pick up all sorts of things. And so this is kind of the first step in that, is being able to just get close to those objects. So we did that on both sides, of course, and practice just with the little jump doing that. And it's kind of a nice way to give her a physical break, but then still engage her mentally a little bit, let her catch her breath, and then that way we can garner up some steam to do another set of jumps before we finish up. Keep in mind, of course, that she is 4 years old and
over there for a reason.
is just kind of getting going into more serious work here under saddle. So we don't want to do too much. I keep the sessions relatively short. Like generally my rides are less than 30 minutes long. And we're just doing little baby jumps, just trying to teach her the different skills that she's going to need to know. A horse's skeleton is usually fully formed around 5.5 years old to 6 years old is kind of average for a lot of breeds. So we want to make sure we don't do anything too strenuous before that time. But keeping in mind that when you start to do a little bit with horses before their skeleton is fully fused, it can help put some stress on their bones in the sense of kind of tell their body where they need to develop more bone. So a little bit of work is good, but a lot of work is bad. It'd be too much stress. So here we're going to slow this jump down just to show you how I really let go of the rein. Total slack, like even though it was a really big, awkward jump, I completely keep my hands forward and just let her have the freedom to do what she needs to do to get that jump done and have that confidence not getting in her way whatsoever, which is really, really important in just building up their confidence. Need to stay out of their way. Here, coming around, playing around with a little canter jump here, which she managed to even land on the correct lead, which is super awesome. So we're going to stop. We're going to give her a cookie on that note. I just wanted her to be soft to that rein before I gave her that cookie. And then I'm going to end up finishing her session on that because that was super awesome. She accomplished a lot. And thanks for watching.